All right, guys, so this is day one of our review of Unit 1. So here's what we're going to do. There's 3 units. It's going to be on the AP test. So we're going to do Unit 1 this week, which is the foundations. Next week, we're going to do Unit 2, which is we'll do one day on the executive branch, one day on the legislative branch, one day on the judicial branch. And then the next week, we'll do Unit 3, which is civil liberties and civil rights. Then right before the test, we will also do a couple days of review. So what I have done for you is I have a unit. I'm calling this like my lesson plans. So what I'd like you to do before each meeting, and if you didn't get to do it today, if you could do it tomorrow, to do the prep work for the meeting, and then we will then do assignments during the meeting. And so today we're going to focus on the kind of pre-Constitution stuff. And then next, on Tuesday, we're going to focus on the Constitution. And then on Thursday, and federalism. And then Thursday, we're going to focus on the foundational documents. So my goal is content, and then content with the FRQ types of questions, okay? So that we're getting both of those things that everybody wanted. So one of the things that I asked you to watch today, did either one of you get to watch the foundations video?
Is that the one with the 2 teachers?
Yes.
I watched it.
This is Mr. Larson, the gray-haired guy, Dan. It's his last year. So, and then Mr. Canine, the one who's on the left of the 2 teachers, he's the one doing all the comparative videos. So there were 9 questions that I asked people to do. And so let me go into my answer key. Long answer key. All right, so let's go over the questions and see kind of what we got. We'll go from there. So what we say when we think about the Declaration of Independence, what we say is limited government.
For that, I wrote that that government's power is limited or restricted by a constitution.
Okay. So one of the things you can maybe like think in your head is think maybe like, I would even think like Magna Carta. Can you guys, Shaylee, can you see me typing? Like, can you see this document? Okay.
Oh
so.
My gosh, I took out that convenience store. Oh my God. Was it Bob's?
So I would think about that idea that how the Magna Carta, that even the king is under the law. So that's really when you think about limited government, kind of think about that. And you think about the Declaration of Independence when, you know, he's talking about the governments are, you know, instituted among men, like what's their purpose, and that if the government is not doing its job. And so there were rights that Englishmen had as colonists that were being denied to them. So the social contract, this is that agreement. So agreement's always between 2 parties, and so who are the 2 parties the social contract is between?
The government and its people.
Yes. So, and this is where we have the right to rebel when that social contract has been broken. And so these are concepts, of course, remember that John Locke had established during the Enlightenment period, and Jefferson would have been very familiar with these, and a lot of people would have been familiar with these. And at William and Mary, as Thomas reminded us so much yesterday, that Jefferson went there, his professor was a huge fan of the Enlightenment. So you see a lot of those ideas. And we joke about that Thomas Jefferson plagiarized, but everybody knows that he was writing Locke's ideas. So Locke and Rousseau, this idea of this social contract, that it's this, we give up part of our rights in order for the government, like we're putting them in the hands of the government for the government to protect them. And if they fail to do their job, then we have the right to rebel. For example, right now in Virginia and in several other states, there are people who feel rightly or not rightly so, but there are people who feel that their rights are being limited and violated because they can't move freely. And they are therefore protesting. Now, is it their right to protest? Of course it's their right to protest, okay? And so that's kind of the beauty of what we do. Now, natural rights. So remember, natural rights are those, there's several different ways that we can define these. We can say that these are, as Thomas Jefferson calls them, unalienable rights, okay? These are our rights that we are born with that no one can take away. So when you think about natural rights, this to me is when I'm thinking First Amendment. Like, these are my freedom of speech. I'm thinking Fourth Amendment. It's my right to privacy, my right to not have my property seized, searched. Like, I think natural rights and I think Bill of Rights. That's what I think in my mind. But that as a person, I have these things. Now, according to John Locke, so let's think about Locke for a moment. Does anybody want to say what the three are that Locke said? Which one of them is different than what Jefferson said?
I can go, or Shaylee can have it, or, oh, Nathan's on. Hey, Nathan.
Go ahead, Zane, you're unmuted.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of property, or something like that.
Life, liberty, and property. Remember that Locke thought that property was the most important right, and what then Jefferson changes that to, does somebody want to take that one instead of Zane? Changes it to life, liberty, and what are we pursuing?
Pursuit of happiness.
Thank you, Nathan. So the pursuit of happiness. Okay. All right, popular sovereignty. All right, Shayla, I'm gonna put you on the spot. You want to take that one?
People like give the government their right to rule, basically. Like, they give the government their power.
Okay, so popular sovereignty, I would say it's more like people rule. Like, that's even like if you actually take the word itself, popular meaning people, sovereign meaning authority or power, right? Like, it's one of our great comparative words. And so literally I would translate that as to people rule or people have the power. And so the word for that would be, it's really democracy. Like, think about voting. That's really what popular sovereignty is, the fact that we have the power. Now, as Shaylee rightly says, we give up some of that power. Rightly so, we give that in the social contract, we give that to the government. So then what's a republic? Nathan, you want to take that one?
I'm not sure. I didn't answer this one.
Okay. So republic, think about representative democracy. And when you think about republic, think about Roman Republic and the Senate, that we're electing people to represent us. Okay? I'll put kind of in the side, like, think about like the Roman.
Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Yeah, I just said that to all my friends.
All right. So then equality, this would be that, is this that all people are equal, right? That they are, that's what Thomas Jefferson said. He said, though, that all men are created equal, right? I've had some people argue with me. Mr. Day likes to say that men included women. I would argue that the Declaration of Independence was speaking more to white men, specifically white men who were churchgoers, who own property, who are over 21, right? Those are the men that are created equal. But when we think about equality, we think about that all people have the same basic rights. Now, throughout our history in the United States, we have expanded democracy. So think about, does anybody want to offer up a suggestion of one of the ways that we've expanded democracy in the United States?
This your task. Can you tell me to add you that? Yeah, add you that.
Zane, I saw you unmute yourself. Do you have some suffrage amendments for me?
There was the, I want to say it was the 20th Amendment that gave women the right.
Okay, so the 19th,
somewhere in that range.
So the 19th Amendment in 1920 gave women the right to vote. Prior to that, we would have had the 15th Amendment, which specifically gave former slaves the right to vote, in essence giving African-American men the right to vote. And then, of course, the 26th Amendment, which gave 18-year-olds the right to vote. We also expanded suffrage in the fact, or expanded democracy in the fact, with the 12th Amendment with or is it the 17th? The direct election of senators. And the direct election of senators, which is, which amendment? In the 17th Amendment, they meant that no longer was it the states, legislatures that were choosing, but the people got to vote. That's an example of an expanding of democracy. Also, when men no longer had to be church members or men no longer had to be property owners, all those things are expansion of democracy. So when we think too about America, one of the things that I like to think about equality for us, it's that equality of opportunity, right? So that's so much more important in America than equality of result. So which of the ideas of democracy are reflected in the Declaration of Independence? Does anybody want to take anything you did specific on this question? So I would say the protection of our natural rights, which we will see, I'm going to put like an arrow here, which we will see later with the institution of the Bill of Rights. Okay, that doesn't happen right away, right? So the expansion of democracy, or democratization if you prefer. We like to be a fancy word. So expansion of democratization, so we could talk about those suffrage amendments. And I'm just gonna put them, amendments. I'm gonna put those in parentheses. So we've got the 19th, let me start numerically, the 15th, the 19th, and the 26th, and the 26th. So we also have the 17th, which is a direct election of senators. And then just anytime that we see just expansion through that. And of course, the whole idea of like the social contract, I think that's a very important part, that we have the right to speak out. And you need to try all means. The thing about the Declaration of Independence is they are listing all their grievances, and they say, we tried this and we tried this. And so they're saying we have tried every possible right way before rebelling. All right, so I've actually answered these questions for you, and I want you to help me give examples. So as we're talking about this foundational stuff, one of the important part, of course, is what are the types of democracy? So we know that we are in America, we are a representative democracy. We are too large to have a direct democracy where every single person actively participates. Think like Athens, Greece. Instead, what we have is a representative democracy, or republic, and it shows itself, there's kind of three philosophies, if you will. These are what we talked about, like the hyper-pluralist, the pluralist theory, the elite theory. Those are what they are. These are just kind of different names. So the big one is kind of the, I would say this is the ideal, and this is the participatory democracy. So with this, I would be thinking kind of like a side point, think about like this. Remember that Madison argues that a large republic is the solution to what problem were we facing in America? You think about in the Federalist essays.
Factions.
Yes, and he said that the largest source of factions, of course, was property, which we would say is the division of wealth in our society. And many people would say that that obviously is still a major issue in our country. All right, so as we, that's what participatory democracy is supposed to be, where every citizen gets to have an equal voice in making policy. And I'd like to say that I took this was Mr. Dan Larson's definition that he talks about in his video about democracy. And so this is that key thing, that everybody's getting to participate. This is, I would say this is our ideal, okay? What we want to have. Does this always happen in the United States? Do we get a broad participation where everybody gets to have a say? Doesn't always happen, does it? But that is the ideal. That is what we're striving for, okay? You know, when you think about, I think we see this happen more on a local level. This is my personal opinion here. I'm going to get, like, when we think about how the school board makes policy, everyone in our community has an opportunity to participate in that. Everyone gets to vote for our school board members. Everyone can reach out to a school board member because it's such a much smaller community. And so we all have the opportunity to make policy, and they reach out to all the stakeholders that are involved with that. They reach out to teachers, to parents, to students. They want to know what we think, what we have to say. All right, so a pluralist is where there is groups that are created that will compete equally to make policy, okay? So in this sense, this is where we think about what kind of groups. So Madison, factions, what he talks about, what do factions really look like in our country today? What would we call them?
Interest groups.
Very good.
I have a question. I can't even think what the documents are called. The one where Madison and like Hamilton or whatever, what are they called?
The foundational the Federalist Essays?
Yes, which Federalist essay is it that talks about the factions?
Okay, so we've got 10, and then 51 talks about separation of powers, and then you've got 78 is the other one which you have to know, which is judicial power, and then 70 or 71 talks about the executive branch. So, but 10 is the one that talks about factions. Can we put that here, like the little Federalist 10?
Yes, please, because I can never keep those straight.
Okay. Yes. And you know what? Let me take a little, I was just working on the foundational documents earlier, so let me just double check that I make sure. Yes, factions are inevitable. And then Federalist 51 is that one that, of course, is talking about like separation of powers. 70 is the one with the president, and then 78 is the one with judicial review and the Supreme Court. And then remember that they're refuting the Brutus, the anti-federalist papers. And so Brutus 1 is the one like, yeah, all this is grand, but that's not really going to work. That we need to look at this at a state level. We're talking about too big of a government, okay? And I would argue that Brutus, that they're arguing, they're saying that it's really just going to be a small group of people making all these decisions, you know. He said that this is the problem of that it's that our country is too large to have this type of democracy, that we're only going to see true participatory democracy, I would say the Brutus would argue, at the state level. All right, so elite democracy is counting on the experts to make decisions for us. And so the elite are the people who wrote the Constitution. The elite are the ones who ran the country to begin with. Think about what would be an example of this? Like the Electoral College, right? Isn't the Electoral College, isn't it designed to be, shall we say, like a fail-safe, right? If the people don't make the right decision, then the Electoral College could, you know, they're supposed to be representatives of the people. But when you read those Federalist papers, it's almost like, well, you know, we have the Electoral College if we can't trust the people, right? And when you think about, this is a perfect kind of argumentative question. Which type of these democracies do you think our founding fathers were arguing in the Constitution? Okay. And you can support any of these. Some of them I think are easier to argue than others. And I think that participatory is easier to argue. We can say, oh, they wanted us to be. But in reality, I think elitist is the easiest to argue. They didn't let us vote directly for president. They didn't let us vote directly for the senators. The only ones that they had trusted us to vote for were the House of Representatives. And they didn't even trust all of us to vote, right? They only trusted a certain group of people. And so elite would be a very easy way to say that that's what our founding fathers were arguing for. All right. How are we feeling about that? How do we feel about the Declaration of Independence and the kind of idea of democracy? Thumbs up, yes. I can see Shaylee and Zane's thumb, and I'm going to go with a figurative thumb there, Nathan, if I don't hear an argument.
Okay. Yeah. So I just checked Sydney Dills. I think she asked about coming in because the code isn't the same as it was. I had to use a different one.
Oh, it isn't? Okay.
No. Yeah, I gave it to her though. She should be coming in a minute.
Okay. Did you get it to her?
Yeah, I tried to.
That's, oh, do you know why it
It
changed?
changed.
Because I set it up as a recurring meeting. That's why it changed. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, there she is. Okay. All right. Hey, Sydney, sorry, I didn't mean to mess the code up. Do I need to send it out to everybody, or what do you think?
I don't know. I just didn't see it. I just thought it was the usual.
Mom, can we? Oh,
I'm gonna mute you. There it goes, Zane. You're good. Okay. All right. Thank you, Nathan. Okay, so Sydney, we just covered the kind of Declaration of Independence, and I've been taping everything, so I'll put it on there. You're coming in at, we've been going for, yeah, like 20 minutes. And we kind of went through all the different parts of the Declaration of Independence, and then we just spent a little bit of time discussing democracy and how that participatory is the kind of ideal, but that elite is probably more of what was really set up to begin with just a small group participating. And I think, could we have people today argue that we are elite democracy, that we still have it's a group of experts? Like, think about this. How much have we really been participating in the COVID policy that's been making? It is the people that we elected, right? We're depending upon them, the experts, to make those decisions. So I think you could also make an argument that the elites still are running our country, okay? All right, so the focus of today, like I said, is the foundational stuff like the Declaration of Independence, the democracy part, and then we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the Articles of Confederation, which was also part of that video that I asked you to watch today. Before next class, we're going to get into the Constitution. All right, so this is a great review for comparative as well as we think about a confederation, a confederal system. So does somebody want to give me a definition of what a confederation or a confederate system is? So let's think about this. In any type of system, we have unitary, federal, and confederal. Those are our three types. And in all of these, it's about how is power divided between your state and your national government, okay? So so for DC versus the 50 states, how is power divided? So in a unitary system, power is centralized, okay? UK is a unitary state, okay? They are centralized in London, and they decide for the entire country, okay? In a federal system, which is where we ended up, power is divided between that DC, that federal national government, and the states. In the confederal system, in a confederation, power is mainly held by the states or regions or provinces or whatever you want to call them, okay? With little power in the national government. And the national government in this sense, and think about this, we're doing US government right now, we're not doing comparative. So we're not talking about, nation in the sense of like England is a nation. We're talking about like the UK, okay? So with little power in the national government. And so they would come together for issues of attack, like if somebody foreign is attacking the country. But the majority of the power, the majority of the decisions are being made by your regional governments. So this would be your, 13 original states, okay? Or what would be another example, okay? Obviously, another example would be the Confederate States of America. Okay, so the Confederacy would be another example. And there's almost no country that functions as a confederacy today. Some people argue that Switzerland could be divided in its 30 cantons, and the United Arab Emirates with its 8 or 15 Emirates. I forget how many Emirates there are.
I thought it was 7.
Okay, 7 sounds good. I'll Google it. How many?
I can name them,
Go
or at
for
least I
it.
used to be able to name. There's Sharjah, Ras Al Khaimah, there's Dubai, there's Abu Dhabi, there is the United Arab Emirates.
Ajman, Fujairah, Al Queen. Okay, so there's 7. There's 7 of them. All right. So Why did the founders establish a Confederate system upon declaring independence? What are they afraid of? Are they?
They didn't want the national government to be too powerful.
Keep in mind, who have they just come from? Okay, they had just broken from Britain, and so Britain has that, you know, it's not an absolute monarchy, but if they don't want that power that the king had. Okay, so they've just broken from Britain. They don't want the national government to be too powerful. They really, even under the 13 colonies, they always acted more like 13 little states. Okay, there wasn't a whole lot of unity. That's what Franklin, you know, that whole like the cartoon with the cut up snake that we have to join or die. That whole idea that we have to be together or it's not gonna work. Like the Annapolis Convention, all these ones, like all the states weren't always coming. Like Rhode Island threw a little fit and went home. You know, I'm gonna take my toys and go home. And so this idea that they all be together is something that comes a little bit later. But the Articles of Confederation, we're gonna quickly see, do not work in strengthening our new nation. And so most people talk about the failures of the Articles of Confederation. And if in college, when I did early colonial America, we talked a whole lot about this. I did a whole big argument about how that there's actually a famous historian whose name is I'm leaving my mind right now, but actually argued that the Articles of Confederation weren't that weak at all. But most historians don't argue that. And really the only thing that lasts from the Articles of Confederation is the Northwest Ordinance with how we set up states. So under the Articles of Confederation, what does the American government look like? So let's be specific. So what does our legislature look like? So it's unicameral, okay? It took a supermajority to approve legislation. So that's that 2/3, right? Okay. There's no executive, okay? And they lack a lot of powers. And we're gonna list those powers and the weaknesses below, okay? So I'm not gonna get too much in there. But without any kind of central executive power, you just have a legislature that's doing everything and it's unicameral. Each state gets one vote, okay? And a supermajority. Very difficult to pass anything. All right, so let's do those weaknesses. You guys tell me those. Any US history kid could tell us this, right? So what are our Articles of Confederation weaknesses?
A bad tax system.
All right, no power to tax.
No army.
Okay, no army. They couldn't even do what with money?
Spend it.
Well, they couldn't even coin money, right? They didn't even have the power to coin money. Basically, you could always ask for volunteers for your army, and you could ask for money to be donated, but they don't have any of these powers. And this is very difficult to run a government, okay? Now, they didn't need to do a whole lot, but the big problem is the United States is in debt. They just fought a huge war called the American Revolution. Wars aren't cheap. Wars aren't free, okay? Now, France did help us, but France didn't pay for the war. And we have got to pay for this, and we're seriously in debt. This is a problem, okay? What is the big incident that is like shining bright light that, oh my gosh, we've got a problem?
Wasn't it like Shays Rebellion or something?
Yes, Shays Rebellion. So we've got these, you know, they're mutiny and taking over, right? And so it becomes very clear that we have no army to stop them. We have no way to stop them. So then they're like, this is a problem. So you know what? We're going to have to revamp. We're going to have to revise the Articles of Confederation. So they go meet, right? That Constitutional Convention. And what do they decide almost immediately? Yeah, Articles of Confederation, we're going to scrap those and we're going to start over. And that's one of the reasons they kept the meetings in secret, because they were not supposed to be doing a new document. They were supposed to be revising the old document, which is why the Anti-Federalists are so upset, because they had fought, in their opinion, so hard to get away from a tyranny of the British, And they felt that the Constitution would just replace with a new type of tyranny. Now, keep in mind that people who are against the Constitution, those anti-federalists, they are a much larger group. However, they are not nearly as well funded and they're not nearly as well organized, because you think, who's writing those Federalist Papers? Hamilton, Madison, you know, John Jay, who we kind of forget about, but John Jay will serve in the cabinet. I mean, those are the people backing it. Jefferson's away in France, okay? Franklin's getting old, and Franklin, he does support the Constitution. And so you've only got a few people like Patrick Henry and, you know, a couple of other Virginians, and they're just not nearly as organized, and there just aren't as many famous anti-federalists. Maybe if they had won, maybe they would be more famous, okay? And so this is going to become that huge debate about what's going to happen with the Constitution. So when we think about when we actually get to the Constitution, they're going to be debating those important things. All right, I'm going to pause real quick here for just a moment. I'm going to pause my share and I'm going to pull up my other document. Okay. All right. So let's talk a little about constitutional principles as kind of an introduction to what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. And so these are some of our objectives that we'll be thinking about, like how do these democratic ideals that were so important to us in the Declaration of Independence, that social contract, those natural rights, how are we going to see those in the Constitution? How are we going to see that participatory democracy? Why is separation of powers so important? Like, let's go back a moment for that Madisonian model. Like, we're Virginians, all right? So James Madison, he's our guy, right? And so as we're thinking about James Madison, that father of the Constitution, that Madisonian model that we need to have, the three branches of government, which of course is coming from another Enlightenment philosopher, Montesquieu, okay? Now guys, when we're taking the AP test, then this is because we're just doing 2 FRQs. You're not going to see these like crazy, like, tell me, you know, how Montesquieu's ideas are in the Constitution. You know, it's not that. It's going to be more that, how do we see separation of powers? Like if I'm thinking about a good concept question that I'm trying to cover, I'm writing the AP test, okay? Let's stop sharing for a minute. I want to look you on the faces here, look you on the eyes, okay? If I'm writing the AP test, okay, I get to ask you 2 questions. I only get to ask you 2 questions about the Constitution, the principles of the foundation of our country, the president, the legislature, the judicial branch, and civil liberties and civil rights. How do I pick 2 questions to ask you, okay? If I'm writing this test, I'm asking you a question that asks about checks and balances, because I want you to show me, how does the executive check the legislative? How does the legislative check judicial? Like something that can use all the things from like one unit, that you can show me lots of rich stuff that you know, okay? So you can take that in the Constitution, like think about it, like how did they show that separation of powers? How are those checks and balances seen? How do we see those in real life? How is policy written, okay? Take like, or you could even take like something we were just talking about, argue how the United States has expanded democracy. How have we expanded suffrage? Give me specific examples. I could talk about civil liberties. I could talk about civil rights, okay? I can show those things. And so they're gonna wanna do something that's gonna have some kind of crossover. So keep that in mind. I don't think you're gonna get these like real nitpicky questions like about John Locke and natural rights or about Montesquieu and those kind of things. They may be like vague and say like, discuss how Article 2 or the Article 1. So you got to know, oh yeah, Congress is Article 1. But hey, how many of you have your handy dandy pocket constitutions, right? What is this test? It is open note, right? So you flip to that. So you're not going to have to memorize those kind of like little things that you would have had to if you're taking the test. I was talking to a former AP student yesterday. He's like super jealous of you. He's like, oh my gosh, everybody's going to get 4s and 5s. I can't believe like how easy it's going to be. I was like, I don't know if it's going to be that easy, but you do have that advantage of you don't have all those super nitpicky multiple choice questions. Okay. So I want you to kind of keep that in mind as we're talking about this. All right, so we're going to do a little bit. I'm going to go back to screen share here. We're going to talk a little bit about this kind of constitutional principles. All right, so this is, we're talking about this, limited government, natural rights, popular sovereignty, all of these things. So I'm not going to go over these again, but just think about how we see these in our country. Okay, we've already kind of went over that, and we know that those are things that were so important in the Declaration of Independence that are then going to be brought into the Constitution. Now, our Constitution, in my opinion, is not complete until that Bill of Rights is added. Okay, that's what Brutus argued, right? That those rights, those individual rights, had to be protected. So those key elements, when you think, what are so important to Americans? What are those things we hold dear? What are those principles of American government? Okay, so limited government. Even the president is under the law, or is supposed to be, right? Even the congressmen and women are supposed to be under the law. Law applies to everyone. The government can't do whatever they want. So, for example, a couple of days ago, last week, when President Trump said he was going to do all these things he was going to do, he doesn't have the power to do that. Those things that he wanted to say, they were not powers that he had. There's been a lot of argument right now. I'll give you a real poignant example. So I don't know if you're aware of this, but the president wants to privatize the post office. Okay, so the post office right now is actually one of the largest parts of our bureaucracy. And in Article 1, in Section 8, and those enumerated powers, it says that Congress has the right to, deal with the Postal Service, okay, to create them. There's been some discussion about whether or not that is, and in my interpretation, I think it's pretty easy to argue. I don't have my handy dandy pocket Constitution on me right here. That when we're looking at that it says the creation of it, could they turn that over to privatize instead of being nationalized? That's where we're kind of looking at. But the president, whether or not that's his authority versus whether that's Congress's authority. So the president is limited in things he can do. For example, the president can't declare war. Remember that the Congress is who can declare war, and we haven't declared war officially on anybody since World War II. Okay, so that's an idea of limited government. All right, rule of law, that there are process. Remember, we've talked about this a lot in comparative government. Does rule of law exist in a country? Does rule of law exist in China? Does rule of law exist in Russia? I'm going to say no. So when we think about rule of law, is the fact that is due process followed? Do you get all of those things that we think about in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th Amendments? All of that. Checks and balances, federalism, popular sovereignty. Remember popular sovereignty, that's us voting, us having a say. Separation of powers, and then judicial review. And judicial review is part of that separation, or part of that checks and balances, really. All right, so let's just do a little bit of history today before I let you go. So we're thinking about the Constitution. So these compromises are important. We have the Great Compromise. That's the one compromise you got to remember, how we set up. We have a bicameral 2-house legislature to appease both sides, small states and large states. And even today in the United States, this continues to be an argument. Think back to the last election. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. She did not win the Electoral College. And that's because small states versus big states. Okay? So when you're looking at this, we talked about this, how like people in Montana, their vote counts for more in the Electoral College than someone in California because of population. How do we balance this? There's a lot of people who believe the Electoral College should still exist because the Electoral College represents what we see here in the Great Compromise. Because the Electoral College makes sure that the small states still have a voice, and that California and Texas don't decide everything, and New York don't decide everything for the United States. Okay? So it's that balance. It was very important to the founding fathers that we wanted to make sure that even if you were a small populated state, that you still had an equal voice in saying. Okay? So remember, I know that we don't drink tea a lot. Well, in the traditional sense. Hold on, I'm gonna get a
I'm gonna take this pause to just say I think Miss DeLong underestimates me.
I underestimate you for drinking tea. Is that what you say?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what I was thinking is, I meant as soon as I thought that, I wanted to say except for Zane and Maria. But what I was thinking of is this analogy. Okay. Now, if I was to show you my kitchen, you would see that I have an unhealthy obsession with sunflowers. But this is a small coffee cup. This is actually from Turkey. This is how we used to drink coffee, in this little small espresso type. Now, this is a saucer. This is a cup. Okay. So the old way, you know, people would drink tea, the British with their little, do you drink tea like this, Zane?
I don't do the pinky thing.
Do you have a saucer?
No, because those cups are too small for tea, in my opinion.
Okay. So I heard this analogy years and years ago. And so this is the kind of idea of like the House versus the Senate. Okay. So the House, there's this large group. They fit, though, in this small little cup, right? Think about this. The House, they have limited arguments, right? Like they can only debate for a certain amount of time because there's so many people, right? And they have certain powers. The thing that originates with the House is, of course, the power to deal with money, okay? Which makes sense because the House is based on population. But the Senate is the upper house. And the point of a saucer is to like allow to hold to let your tea cool. And so the saucer is supposed to represent the Senate and the fact that they are the cooling factor, that if the House gets all rowdy, the Senate can check that. The Senate can provide a cooling kind of impact on that. So think about the fact that the Senate has to approve all the presidential appointments, the Supreme Court justices, all your federal judges, that when you think even about impeachment, House, oh my gosh, we got to impeach. And the Senate are like, oh yeah, we don't want to hear your arguments. No, but they, you know, they're going to take their time. They're going to have a little debate here. They're going to vote. And so in the House too, I like to think of the Senate, I like to think about this too. It's all spread out, right? So I can talk as long as I want, right? I can do a filibuster even, yes? You're not going to limit me by putting me in this cup, yeah? So there's a lot of different ways you kind of think of like this little crazy analogy here. I feel like I'm doing like a children's church sermon because I got my little my props here. But the idea of how important it is that these two branches work together, okay? And I think that's a very important because even the House and Senate, you know, in a way have checks on each other. And there's a lot of debate about what's the most powerful branch. And I think that it's pretty easy to argue that the legislature has the most ability to be the most powerful. When we think about the most powerful person, of course that comes to the president. But as an entity, it would definitely come to be Congress. And think about that. Think about all the powers that they have that are enumerated in that Article 1, especially in Section 8, where they just go on and on and on about all the different things that they are able to do, okay? And think about how that they've expanded those powers, like through the Commerce Clause. Oh my gosh, they've taken so much advantage of the Commerce Clause to do all kinds of things to expand their power. All right. So when we think about, you know, Article 1 is all about Congress. And so we've got and then of course, this is a little joke here that, you know, House is kind of like a playground, right? And all the real work happens in the Senate. But it's true that they're supposed to work together and to come together and to make bills. And so then Article 2, remember, is all about the executive branch. So if you're trying to, I guess you guys don't really have to remember now, but remember our acronym when we were trying to remember is Lucy Eats Jolly Ranchers and Cooks Rats. I have been using that for almost 20 years now, over 20 years now, and I learned that when I taught 7th grade civics. So Lucy Eats Jolly Ranchers and Cooks Rats. So Lucy, legislative. Eats, executive. Jolly, judicial. Lovely little steps of the Supreme Court where we took a picture and we went to DC, right? Okay. Lucy Eats Jolly Ranchers. Ranchers is, of course, the relationship between the states. This is where we're talking about that full faith and credit clause. Great vocabulary word. So the full faith and credit clause, remember, is, well, does anybody want to try to tell me what the full faith and credit clause? Can we go a little deep? Can we remember that one? All right, it's okay. full faith and credit clause is that the state of Virginia takes in full faith and credit what North Carolina contracts, driver's license, marriage license, divorces. Remember that we recognize what other states do, okay? That it's that in the relationship between the states. And then we have Lucy Each, Jolly Ranchers, and amending the Constitution. So let's think about amending the Constitution for a moment. 27 formal amendments to the Constitution. 26 out of 27 times it's been done the same exact way. 2/3 of Congress proposed it. 3/4 of state legislators ratified it. Does anybody remember the exception? The one time we did it differently. We did it with the state convention. It is the repeal of prohibition. Okay? That's the one time we did it differently. And that's easy to remember because it's the one time we took away an amendment, right? It's a weird one. But it's okay because you don't need to remember that idea. But look here, this is a wonderful example of federalism. What do we see? We see the national government side and we see the state side, that they're equally sharing power. They both have to have a say. Can we go completely without Congress? Can we do limit on terms? We sure can. We just started in the states and we finished it in the states. We can bypass Congress. We've never done it. But if we want to have term limits on congressmen, I think that's what we're going to have to do. Do you think Congress people are going to vote for their own term limit? Probably not. Okay. All right. Lucy Eats, Jolly Ranchers, and Cooks. What does that stand for? Constitution is supreme. Okay. So Uncle Sam, Superman. So we have the supremacy clause. And that says that the federal government, that the Constitution is supreme, that even the federal government has to answer to that, okay? So when the Supreme Court said that segregation was illegal, that the 14th Amendment said that we cannot segregate in schools, that separate but equal, by definition, is unequal, then no longer could any state segregate. When they then interpret under the Heart of Atlanta Motel to say that that also applies to businesses, we can't segregate, then it couldn't happen anywhere. When U.S. versus Windsor and then Obergefell versus Hodges says that same-gender marriages are legal in the entire United States, even though Virginia's Constitution says that marriage is between one man and one woman, Virginia has to recognize and issue same-gender marriage certificates, okay? Because the federal law says so, because the Constitution is interpreted to say so, okay? And then Lucy Each, Jolly Ranchers, and Cooks rats. Now, she could cook a lot of things. Why does it have to be rats? I mean, she could cook ratatouille. I guess that would work. Maybe that's disgusting. But it has to be rats because the 7th article is ratification. And it took the supermajority, 9 out of 13 states had to ratify it. And to be honest, Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York also had to ratify it. If Virginia had not have ratified it, it wouldn't have mattered. We're right in the middle. We were so large, they had to have us. It's the same thing. We couldn't have done this without New York. We couldn't have done it without Pennsylvania. And ultimately, all 13 states will ratify the Constitution, but as soon as 9 had done it, it officially became law. And then the first thing that Congress does, what do they add to our Constitution? When Congress, first thing they do when they meet, what do they add?
The Bill of Rights.
Bill of Rights. Thank you, Zane. They add the Bill of Rights. Has to be added. Okay, now, I'm going to leave the rest of this for later. We're going to have a discussion next class when we talk about more about Federalist 51, which is that separation of powers, all that. So if you look back, I'm going to pull this up. All right, so let me show you a couple of things here. What I want you, my expectations are for you now. So I put in classroom, I put this little lesson plan, if you will. All right, so you should have done this, right? The Watch the Foundations video. If you'd like, and then you should have answered 1 through 9. If you didn't answer those, I answered them, and I'm going to put my answer key. Actually, if you go onto this, If you click right here, where does it take you? To my answer key, okay? And you can make a copy of that to have, or you might want to make a copy when we what? Finish them all, right? Okay, so you can go there with that. And then if you'll notice, we're doing these answers together. So like I haven't done the ones that I want you to do tomorrow. I stopped where we stopped today, okay? Then what I'd like you to do for tomorrow, there's a federalism video. Every one of your videos will not be of the two guys because I know you guys get tired of watching the same one, so I'm trying to mix them up. So the foundation ones and the federalism is going to be the same guys, the Citizen You guys, Mr. Canine and Mr. Larson. But the one that we're going to do on Thursday is a different one, just to break it up, okay? So what I'd like you to do for tomorrow's class is to watch the federalism video, and then I'd like you to do 18 through 41. Now, I know that sounds like a lot of questions, but they're pretty straightforward, and we've answered a lot of them already. Do as many as you can. If you don't get to all of them, that's fine. And you guys, I put it in there as materials, so you each have to make your own copy. But, can everybody see this? Okay, so there's some here, you know, what are these words, like where were they in the Constitution? This is the stuff that's really important to me, this 23, 24, and then as we're getting into federalism. Federalism is the big concept. Now, I told you a long time ago, and I've said it since then, that I would not take the US government test if I couldn't define federalism, right? So let's go ahead and define federalism before we talk about it tomorrow. I'm going to define it for you now. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I expect you to be able to define it for me tomorrow. So when we see power that is shared between the national government and the state government, and remember, I got to have that second part, right? With the federal government or national government being supreme, okay? So power is shared. You can't just say that there is power, because the definition of a type of government, whether you're unitary, confederal, or federal, is where is the power? You have to say that that power is shared, that it is the idea is that it's a fairly equal share, but that power, ultimately, the federal government is supreme, okay? Then there's talking about enumerated, implied powers, a couple of other things. Any question that you get stuck on, don't lose sleep over it. Don't fret over it. We'll talk about it more tomorrow. Dual and cooperative federalism. We talked about this yesterday with Secretary of Education Carney. So those are kind of great things to think about. And then I like this little chart. I did not make this sheet up. I'd love to take credit for it. This is from some of my great friends with my little nerdy Facebook group. And they put these in here. You guys know my theory. You don't believe in reinventing the wheel. There are lots of fabulous government teachers out there, and I think that we work better when we all share and work together. So these are some important concepts of federalism. I would say, guys, that some of the most important parts of this sheet are those like second half of the questions, because that's really getting into the nitty-gritty. And keep in mind when you're doing this, when you take the test, if you have a possibility of having two computers, one computer where you have it set up to take the test, and one computer where you could have like these things open so you could look at them, okay? If that's possible. If it's not possible, and anybody wants to be like, hey, Ms. DeLong, it would be really helpful if I had a paper copy of these. When we get closer to the test, you tell me that. I'll get them printed and we'll get them mailed to you so that you'll have them in time for the test, okay? So you think about that and be thinking about, we still have plenty of time to decide. We're still 6 weeks out, but think about this. Do I want to write my answer? Do I want to type it? Okay. Thinking about those things too, like how you're going to plan this out. Those are things that you can be thinking about. But remember, you're going to be able to use these things that we're doing together, but you want to be able to work quickly through everything. What's your friend on any document that you're using on a computer? What's going to help you find a word really?
Control find.
Control find, right? So remember, if I hit Control F right now, okay, it says find in the document. So I started and it says Commerce Clause. Oh my gosh, where did I write Commerce Clause? And then I can just find it like that. Or it says 17th Amendment. Okay, that one's not on here. Or what if I look for, it is on my answer key though one, right? Can I do this in a PDF? Can I do Control Find in a PDF? Yes. Okay. So keep that in mind. That's going to be your friend on the day. Okay. That's the advantage to having documents on a computer versus having paper copies. Okay. But so you just have to think about those kind of things. And even if you, let's say that maybe you don't have two computers, maybe your best plan would be to have the computer open with the documents. And if you're a good writer, you know, write on hand. If it takes you forever to type, maybe you don't want to type. Okay. So those are things to be thinking about. All right. So in classwork, I put prep for Monday session, prep for Tuesday session. So what I've done, like there's the video and then there's that same document that we're working on. And in Stream, I have here, this is what I'm calling my lesson plans. And this has got everything in it, like what we're doing. Like, and I've already put in there, if you want to go ahead and, you know, you're an overachiever and you're super bored tomorrow, let's go ahead and work on what we're going to do Thursday. That's fine too. Okay. Does this make sense to you? This is what I thought was a good way to kind of outline everything. And so my thought was to try to marry all the different things that you guys wanted. Is that my goal is we'd be very content heavy the first 2 days, and then we would do the practice implication of how does this look like on one of the questions. But also each day I would try to give also a practical tip for the test, okay? And so that's kind of my thought today, is to be thinking like, am I gonna write? Am I gonna type? Remember, I'm gonna have these available, know that I have that control find feature, okay? All right. So how you feeling? You feel a little bit better about that? Like, I would say the highlights of today, okay? Declaration of Independence, weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation, and then participatory democracy. That's a word we want to kind of focus on, okay? Are those all things that we feel okay with? All right, perfect.
I have a question.
Yes.
It's about like the AP exam, not really the content we went over today, but
That's fine, go ahead.
Are they gonna like send us a link? Is they're gonna send us like a link or something so we can like go in and see how we're gonna take the test before like the day of the test, and we have to like figure that all, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I would imagine that they will do some kind of like make sure you can log in kind of thing, so you're not like freaking out about time and stuff. I do know, like once it starts, like it starts and you like can't like pause it to like make your, you know, because you have 25 minutes to do the argumentative and whatever to do the other. So you can't just like hit pause and like, oh, my 25 minutes aren't going, right? Yeah, like they're still going, okay? So I know a couple of things that we've discussed with that. I know that we will probably, as AP teachers, be having some more meetings. I'm getting emails probably every other day from College Board telling me like, check this out, check this out. Part of that email that you guys got, like where I asked you to go check, what they really wanted to know, not if you were taking the test, but that you knew that the test had changed. There are possibly some AP students out there who aren't hearing from their teachers. And so they just wanted to make sure that you guys knew, okay? So you guys know about the change. And Caleb was the only one I hadn't heard from the other day, and he messaged me today because I know he works a lot, so he's not always able to be with us. And so everybody knows about the change. You guys know there's 2 questions. And, you know, we still have that other document. Here, let me go back real quick to Classroom just to kind of remind you guys. So remember in Classroom, I still have this, if you come down a little bit, this is that huge, like, these are all the like amazing review places that I think are amazing and lots of different things. There is this one that says AP US Government, and you guys can add this to your drive. Do you know how to do that? So if you come up here to where it says File and you click, there would be a button here. So there's not one on mine because it's already in my drive, but you can actually click on it and you can add it to your drive. Okay, so like for example, let's go with something that's shared with me. Let me just show you something really quick. So like this document here is not in my drive, but I can right click on it and I can add it to my drive. Maybe this one is in my drive. But like, I'll show you, for example, like we were doing USB uploads today, and there was a folder that Dr. Trosper created, and it wasn't in my drive. So I right-clicked on it, and I added it to my drive. And then anytime Dr. Trosper makes a change to it, I can see it in my drive, and then it's in my drive. So you guys can go to my document there, that the one that has all the details, that has everything that you need to know, info for students, all these links. You guys can add that to your drive. You could even do the same thing with my little lesson plan thing so that you'll be able to access it very quickly, okay? They, of course, are always in Classroom, but if you're like, oh, I don't want to have to look for it in Classroom, I just want to be able to get it real quickly, just add it to your drive. And if you add it to your drive, I'm still the owner of it, and when I make changes, you'll still be able to see that. If you make a copy, you won't see anything if I make changes, right? With me? Okay. All right, any other questions? I think that's a great question, Sydney. So those are the kind of things, if you guys have questions about, we need to be asking. All right. So I'm going to sign off for tonight, and I will see you guys back here at 7. I'm sorry about the link. I realized because I set up a new recurring meeting that's why the link had changed. So I will send it out and just to remind everybody that that it is a new link, okay? All right, so lovely to see you all as usual. So, and I will see you all back here again tomorrow, yes? All right, night guys.